We look at the religions of ancient cultures like the early Greeks, the Romans, the Babylonians, the Assyrians and all of those empires long gone, one observation will not escape you. These cultures were totally obsessed with deities. It's almost as if they thought of these deities as part of some kind of cosmic cabinet, where you would have a secretary of transportation, commerce, health, tourism, education, defense, etc. So they have a god for every imaginable aspect of human concern. The Greeks have a god of sea travel, god of forest hunting, god of light, god of darkness. Not to be outdone, the Romans had their own pantheon of gods too. In fact, Roman deities cover an even wider range of divine specialties. They have a god of harvests, god of beauty, god of virility, and so on and so forth. In fact, this scheme of specialization for gods gets so highly refined that if one subject is too big for a single god to handle, they break it up and add even more gods to handle each subcomponent. So there's no god of weather. Oh no, weather is much too complicated, therefore, they broke it up and assigned a god of thunder, god of lightning, god of rain, god of wind. I don't have the record with me right now, but I'm pretty sure there must have been a god of relative humidity, and a god of low-pressure areas. Deities represented every virtue you can think of too. God of love, god of war, and sometimes a useful god to call upon between wars, a god of ceasefire. The Apostle Paul even noted during one of his walks around downtown Athens, that there was even a statue dedicated to the unknown god. Although the Greeks didn't even bother to invent any name for him, I'm pretty sure that he was the busiest among all the gods. I can only imagine how all prayers for the solution of any problem of undetermined cause were submitted to the poor thing. These ancient cultures had a palliative view of godhood which sometimes backfired. If you study the pattern of rituals and festivals pertaining to each god, it's evident that the people offered sacrifices to them for two main reasons. 1. To invoke the help of a particular god if you're seeking a solution to a problem, and 2. To appease that god if you displeased him for submitting the wrong problem to the wrong god. The Greeks must be constantly scratching their heads saying, "Give me a break. I haven't displeased any god yet, but give me time," with so many of them standing around every corner. What is ridiculous is how, to these ancient cultures, godhood is not even reserved to figures of righteousness or virtue only. Think of any vice, and they have a god for those too. They have a god of lust, erotica, forerunner of today's porn industry, god of temper, god of strife. It's not difficult to understand why they had such a complex structure for religion. Whenever they face any challenge that overwhelms the human capability to solve, they just create another god, and carve up another block of marble to depict his image in statue form. That was a long time ago, of course. Modern Greeks and Italians don't do that anymore. I think they ran out of marble. That system of having many gods is called polytheism. In ancient times, you can just imagine how polytheism must have driven their economy. Every god had a temple which is operated and maintained by its own class of priests. You can just imagine how many priesthood schools there had to be to keep all those temples constantly supplied with new young priests to replace the oldest ones who were too weak to still be washing marble statues. The requirements of infrastructure is another thing to consider. Every temple for every god had to be built entirely by hand, by an unimaginable number of ancient architects, carpenters, stone cutters, furniture makers, people to make the drapery, linens, altar utensils and all those thousand little things that attend religious rituals.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Sister Cherubim.
Remember, these people are the same ones who would have to select the leaders of their governments too, by whatever selection method they used predating modern democracy. History records for us that almost without exception, those who would endeavor to rule as kings, emperors or whatever, had to claim they were anointed by one, or some, or all of the known gods at the time. In fact, invoking the so-called divine right of kings was usually the first item in every prince's resume. That's understandable given the fact that this huge religious service community and related industries that supported their system of polytheism is obviously the largest demographic group. In modern political language, the polytheistic community is a huge bailiwick, or what is often referred to these days as the base. Whoever commanded the support and loyalty of this non-secular base, controlled government and the politics of the era. No wonder when a king or emperor gets too old, and could no longer endear himself to this base, he just did the next logical step. He would issue an edict that henceforth, he was to be regarded as a god himself. That gives undisputable evidence that all the other earlier existing gods were impotent. The people were just too slow to catch on, and the awoke ones were in the king's payroll. Clearly, this newest inductee to the Hall of Gods, being a man-god, enjoyed a clear advantage because he can do a lot more self-promotion than the pathetic marble gods. You see, the man-god-king controlled the marble trade. Did you ever wonder why every time archaeologists discover another lost civilization, or another lost city in the jungle somewhere, the oldest and most enduring structures they find are always these temples? The reason is that polytheism was the central institution that propelled these cultures to their peak. Unfortunately, the rising cost that these ancient civilizations had to pay, to keep these systems in place, a price which the people often paid literally with their own lives, is also what triggered their decline and eventual demise. It's melodramatic that these temples, perhaps, can now be thought of as the collective monument to the god of colossal failure. But it must strike a true fear of God in the hearts of this present generation, to realize that these crumbling temples to man-made gods were left there to be discovered by modern archaeologists. It conveys a profound message of their tragic history. If nothing else, the message to this generation is that even with all these gods' jurisdictions combined, these temples along with their respective host gods and once hectic priesthoods, still suffered the same ultimate end. They've all disappeared. Not one of them survived. In the middle of all that swirling multicultural storm of polytheism, however, there stood a small battered community of survivors that have endured unimaginable persecution, including coming right up to the edge of extinction by genocide. But they managed to overcome, by tenaciously hanging on to system of worship that was singularly unique among all the empires they have now outlived. That system, which is marked by a fierce dedication to only one god, is called monotheism. But we will have to talk about that in another video. If you liked this video, please give me a big thumbs up and click the subscribe button on the screen. If you like to be notified every time I upload a new video, you can also click the notification bell. Thanks, I'll see you in my other videos.